Good evening. My name is Carol Barry Austin, and along with my co-chair of the Schools Committee, Jocelyn Ryan, we welcome you here this evening. Before we continue with the program, I would like to thank the candidates for joining us this evening and the Schools Committee members who assisted with developing the questions for this evening. As many of you know, the Schools Committee has focused for many years on issues of integration and equity in our school district. Our goal is a school district that is stably integrated overall, where there is equity for all students within classes, levels, and schools, and also where the staff is racially and culturally diverse, and committed to creating an inclusive, bias-free environment. Tonight's goal is to challenge the candidates to consider how members of the Board of Education influence district policy on equity and integration in our schools and classrooms. Candidates will be asked to respond to questions regarding the district's intentional integration initiative, the persistent minority academic achievement gap, and the continued racial inequity in discipline. Recent events in our country, which are also reflected in our community, prove that issues of equity and inclusiveness need to be intentional and supported. Our moderator this evening is Audrey Rowe, the Coalition's Program Director, who is somewhere in the room, Audrey. And our timekeeper is Jocelyn Ryan. A special thank you to both of you and to all of you for attending this evening. We will begin the evening with my co-chair giving you some guidelines in terms of format and timing, which you'll also see on the table. So if anybody arrives late, you can just point them to the sign on the table. So thank you all.
Thanks. Oops, thank you. So we're going to start off the evening with introductions from the candidates and their opening statements. Because we have such a large slate this year, we're going to do 1 minute opening statements. For each question, which will be assigned to a candidate, they will have 1.5 minutes for the first candidate to answer, and everyone else 1 minute to respond. And then their closing statements will also be 1.5 minutes. I'll be there and I'll be waving the countdown at you. So then draw your attention to the guidelines on your table. There to be questions, not statements. Please write them on the index cards. Please include your name because we will call you up to read your question. We'll take as many from the audience as time will allow, and questions should be answerable by any candidate and not directed to or about any one candidate. And then Nancy Gagne, our Executive Director, will close. And I think that's everything. Audrey.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Because we have so many wonderful candidates, we're going to jump right in. We'll start the evening by starting on this end with Mr. Jeffrey Bennett, asking you to introduce yourself and have your opening statement. And we'll just go in succession there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Bennett, as all you board watchers probably are aware by now. This is the third debate of this electoral season, but it's actually my second CCR debate. I did participate in a CCR debate 12 years ago in 2012. Since 2012, our district has changed regarding equity, although in some ways it's the same. This isn't a complete list of the changes we've made, but we got rid of gatekeeping for advanced classes and now have open access, which I was involved with. We finally have adopted a phonics-based reading program, which I advocated for, although it was implemented very recently. We've created an administrative department of access and equity. We have more minority history in our history classes. We've made Marshall and Bolden K5s, which I think will be very beneficial. And symbolically, we've moved on from the name Jefferson for what's now the Bolden School. We've made progress in more black students taking AP classes, but our internal achievement gap is still unchanged. And we need to accelerate progress with disparities in discipline. Our teaching core.
Hello, my name is Deirdre Brown. My husband and I moved to Maplewood when my son was entering kindergarten, my daughter 4th grade. Now my son's an 8th grader at SOMS and my daughter's a 12th grader at the high school. And the primary reason we moved to Maplewood was because we wanted to live in a diverse and inclusive community. And I want to thank the community Coalition on Race for all the work that you do in our community in this area. Professionally, I'm an assistant director at the Government Accountability Office, so I understand the importance of policy governance and accountability, and I believe that sets me up well to serve on the Board of Education. And the past few years have been chaotic for our district, I will say, but I believe that we have a chance at a new beginning. We have a new superintendent, and I believe that with new leadership behind him, we can support him and get our district back on track. We have an amazing SOMA community, and we can create a district that reflects that community and serves all students in our community. Thank you.
Well, thank God I have them here to help me. My name is Bethany Joseph.
No?
Thank you, Deirdre. My name is Bethany Joseph. I'm a Columbia High School graduate, class of '87, and I will make my same joke from 2 debates ago. It means I look very good for my age. We are here tonight. We were asked to think very broadly and then drill down around equity. And as a social worker, I just wanted to put out there for us that an equity framework or putting on an equity hat is not something that you do when it's convenient or opportune. It's a way to walk through life. It's to walk with others and to ask them to walk with you. So my answers will be from that framework as a social worker, and I look forward to the discourse tonight.
Thank you to the CCR for having us here this evening. My name is Bimal Kapadia. My wife Swati and I moved here in 2016 from NYC. Like most of you, we fell in love with SOMA because of its true diversity. The backgrounds, the arts, it's the DNA of this town, and it vibrates with creativity. My sons, Cyan and Nikhil, are in 3rd and 4th graders at South Mountain. Their enthusiasm for school is inspiring and infectious, and their teachers have been wonderful. I'm a public school kid and a product of the arts. My mom was a painter and a social worker, and the arts were a big part of my education. Professionally, I run a production studio, and telling stories about identity are some of the proudest moments of my career, particularly the immigrant story, which I'm also a product of. We've all experienced tumultuousness in the last few years, a COVID hangover, budget instability, divisiveness, areas well pointed out by the CCR in their work, and what's at stake for integration and equity. I also understand what's at stake for this district, which is why I'm running and making a difference from the inside. We have a choice to change the climate, and I look forward to talking more about that tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Steffen. I'm an environmental lawyer and a former teacher. I'm proud to call this place home. This is a community that brings together people from many different backgrounds to live together as friends and neighbors. It's also a community where we recognize our shortcomings and work to improve. Our district is excellent in a lot of ways, but we're still not there in terms of meeting the needs of every student. We're going to talk tonight about some of the ways that we can improve. All of those improvements are going to require members of the Board of Education to work together with each other and with the superintendent and with the community. That's something I know how to do. As a lawyer, I work all the time with folks on the other side to get things done. As a former teacher, I know the kinds of things our teachers are going through, and I'll make sure their voices are heard. And as the only independent candidate up here, I'm committed to working with everybody else, no matter who they ran with. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Kwame Telesford. I'm the current board president. I grew up here in South Orange, Maplewood. And as you can see from my t-shirt, I consider the Community Coalition race to be a home for myself because they recruited me when I was graduating from high school to, go door to door and survey parents or new residents, asking them, where do they show you around? Because the idea of segregation is something that the Community Coalition race has always been working against. And it's that idea of equity is something that we have to live and embody that is truly important. And I think that work is continuing, and we're seeing that work continue in the school district as we see with the Intentional Integration Initiative. that work is something that we must continue to strive for. And I think that when I consider the work that I have done with Arun Vadlamani, and now hopefully with Bethany Joseph, we can continue to that work of equity. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Arun Vadlamani and I'm currently on the board. This is the last forum of our election season, and many candidates spend weeks talking negative stuff about our children. So I want to bring the focus back on what we achieve and what we are really known for. I am proud that my daughter graduated from CHS and my younger one is a freshman in high school. I am proud that we have the oldest high school building in New Jersey and the 17th oldest in the country. I am proud that we're the first high school in New Jersey to have lavender graduation. I am proud that we are among the first to truly implement integration in a meaningful way. I am proud of all the CHS graduates who have won Olympic medals. I am proud of all the awards in arts, Grammys, Tonys, Emmys, way too many to count. Though not a district achievement, I am proud that South Orange invented the Sloppy Joe. And finally, I look forward to a future Nobel laureate from SOMA. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our candidates. We're going to jump right in. I will read the question and then direct it to one of our candidates to answer, and then the other candidates will also have an opportunity to respond afterwards. Our first question is, a disparity in academic achievement between white students and black and brown students has been a persistent issue in this school district. Do you believe that by following Dr. Fergus's recommendations and implementing the integration plan, we will finally close the gap? Please explain. I direct this to Mr. Paul Stefan.
Thank you for that question. The opportunity gap is a difficult problem, and it's one that we face here. It's one that we face nationwide. The integration initiative, I think, is an important step in not just making each school look roughly like the district as a whole, but ensuring or being a step towards equity. So I think that's an important step. I also agree that the recommendations of Dr. Fergus are important, and I think they provide a path forward to closing the opportunity gap. There's a lot of recommendations. There are 23, and they range in a number of ways, but they include attracting and retaining a diverse workforce. They include making sure our instruction at every level and in every class is rigorous, and that basically means that students are getting a good mental workout in every single class they're in. I think that's incredibly vital. And we need to make sure we're supporting students not just from an academic perspective, but from a social and emotional perspective, because we know, and Dr. Fergus has identified, when students feel as though they belong in their learning environment, that they're better able to succeed. I think the Fergus recommendations ought to be one of the top priorities of the Board of Education. This is a place where every board member needs to keep this in the front of mind, and where we can work together with the superintendent to make sure that we're sort of holding his feet to the fire, making sure that we're tracking our progress on this, make sure we're providing the resources and support to make sure that those recommendations are implemented.
Response? Anyone can begin.
I agree that the Ferguson recommendations are a great foundation. We should always look at them as the floor and not the ceiling of the work that we have to do. Classroom integration is very important, but also ensuring that the curriculum reflects, a child can see themselves in the curriculum. That also requires us to have more professional development with the teachers to ensure that they have a culturally responsive education and also are culturally sensitive to their more diverse students. When it comes to diversifying the workforce, I think it's important that we do go to HBCUs and recruit from there, but we also have to remember that New Jersey has no HBCUs, so it's vitally important that we look within the state to look at some of the black student organizations that we can draw from to gain people, to get people to come from the workforce. But that also requires us to have competitive salaries for new teachers that can come and help the school system. And yes, and of course, I think the most important thing is we equalize our PAs by having diverse classrooms. Yes.
Okay, you can hear me. I agree with what's been said. I think we've tried a lot over the years, and to me, I think our best chance right now is to implement the Fergus recommendations. He's an expert in the field. He did a thorough study, and a lot of what he said was about heterogeneous learning, lifting kids up, which I think is the harder work than trying a one-size-fits-all approach. I appreciated a lot of what he said about encouraging a growth mindset. We absolutely must have teachers that are trained in cultural competency, teachers that look like our population. I really appreciate what he said about having rigorous curriculum. I think that the example he gave about our 6th grade math curriculum, having 10 days of study skills and then no higher level cognitive thinking when our pre-algebra class doesn't have to have those study skills and they are getting those higher level of thinking, that just shouldn't be the case. That's bias right there, and we should be evaluating all of our curriculum to make sure all levels of students are being challenged and provided the skills needed.
Thanks, Bimmel. This is it's been rigged. No, I'm just kidding. All right, we'll do Bimmel's. Thanks. I think taking a little bit of a step back and looking at systemic racism is important at this time too. There is no single initiative that is going to undo that. The III is a step on the path, and these are building blocks. So the important thing for me is that we are putting these building blocks in place, shoring them up, securing them, and continuing to look forward and move forward. We have removed the gatekeeper to AP classes, so any student can choose that, but then an interesting point that was raised at one of our coffees was then there's racial isolation. A friend's daughter is the only black child in a class, and there's a lot of pressure for her, and she has a lot of feelings around that, and it's something we need to look at and work on a bit more. Thanks.
It's my hope that the Fergus recommendations will be an accelerant to the progress we've already been trying to make for at least 20 years. Something in the Fergus recommendations I particularly like is like the directive that we work very hard to imbue a growth mindset among our students. The idea that intelligent is something that you can become through hard work. It's not a fixed quantity that you're born with. Like through practice, through studying, through reading, through listening to teachers, you can actually become like a good student and even what would be called quote unquote smarter. I do see the Fergus recommendations as a floor. I think to really close the achievement gap, we really need to use the after school hours and even the summer a lot more. And we should have more summer and after school enrichment opportunities for kids, to make up for the fact that what's called the achievement gap is also an opportunity gap, because some kids from low income backgrounds just don't have all the amazing opportunities that kids from affluent backgrounds have. Regarding the III, I have consistently supported an integration plan, but the version of an integration plan we have, I think, does create a lot of unnecessary hardship and stress, and we need to get busing right, and we need to be more collaborative with parents.
So one thing good about the Rutgers implementation plan is that it is being implemented. I mean, I know people are talking about something futuristic. No, it's happening right now. We've had that. We've taken the results and shown it to the judge, who is the monitor, and he's been very pleased with the results. So what that means is progress is happening. Now, will that by in itself solve the achievement gap? Of course not. I mean, in fact, I would argue that we don't even know what causes the achievement gap. There are many, many factors that go into it. And this is one of the many foundations that we have to build or chip away, depending on how you look at it, to reduce the achievement gap. III is one, Rutgers implementation is one, and then also not to forget the whole access and equity. I mean, so these are the core foundational principles by which we can move towards reducing the achievement gap. And I just want to reiterate one more time is that it is happening right now. We have, as Paul correctly pointed out, 23 different action plans. Each one has a smart decision out it, and we're actually following that.
Yeah, that's me. So the I'd like to agree with the CCR's concern that any budget instability can have a negative effect on the intentional integration and decreasing the racial achievement gap. So it's something in all the stuff that we have to be very mindful of, because any cuts will disproportionately impact students of color. But given the Dr. Fergus recommendations, I'm hoping that we can get there as fast as possible to that implementation. It is a work in progress, but it's also a great time to get a feedback loop. Well, speaking of feedback loop, we can get something from the teachers. We can get feedback from the parents and students. The teachers who are on the front lines of this, seeing that, it's a great opportunity now to start to get that while we can constantly modify the policy. I'd also like to look at the full facets of the student's achievement: academics, special education, VOTEC, arts, athletics. These are all components of the education, and I know we want to hone in on the academic achievement there, but there's a lot more to that comes to the students.
Thank you all, and thank you for so smoothly transitioning across each other. I'd like to remind you that even though I'm the person standing here asking the question, these are the questions and concerns of the community. So as you respond, feel free, to look out there, because they're the ones who want to hear your position. Our second question is, if a black family considering a move to this community expressed concern to you regarding racial equity in the school district, what would you tell them? And we're directing this to Mr. Jeffrey Bennett.
Well, I would be honest for one thing. I would say that this is a very good school district, but we do have a wide achievement gap, and we don't serve African American students as well as we should. I will be honest and say that a higher percentage of African American students who can go to private school do so than in other districts. I would say that there are black students here who have reached the highest levels of achievement, in the arts and academics and sports, but I would say we do have some gaps, and it is actually it's been the district's priority, I think, for over 20 years, but we have not successfully managed to close that gap. If the person asked me questions about the integration plan, I would say, students are not actually sorted by race, it's by socioeconomic status. I would say that, it's a work in progress. We're trying to make it better. We're trying to make it fair. We're trying to get busing to work right, but it's not there yet. I would say that, we're working to have our teaching corps match the diversity of the town itself, but we're not there yet. I would say the African American population in the schools has actually been falling. More African Americans are moving to other suburbs. I would say that, it's a district of opportunities, but also a district that, throws a lot of frustrations at you too. It's not a well-oiled machine, for anyone of any race. I would say that the special education department has not worked as well as it should. I'd say we've had instability for the last 8 years, I think 8 directors in 8 years, and that we have a large number of vacancies. There are some children with special needs whose needs are being met, but not everyone.
I would tell a black family that I'm extremely proud to be a resident here of South Orange and Maplewood, partly because I grew up here and I knew where we've come from. When I was younger, we used to have tracking, and we removed that. So I'm proud to see that the district has removed many of those obstacles that held us back. I'm proud that we actually have no more gatekeepers for AP classes. So we now see more black students taking AP classes, and we achieved the AP Gold status, where we have more students achieving a score of 3 or higher, and an increasing number of black students in those courses. There is still work to be done, as there is anywhere in this country, but one of the great things about living in this community is that there's a commitment to improving things and improving access. And so if a black family says, is this a great place to live? Yes, this is an amazing place to live, because this is the work that we're doing.
So, if a black family walked up and asked me this question, I would very easily, it's actually a very easy question. I would say, Dr. Kwavi Telesford, look at him. He grew up here, he was born here, he went to school system here, he went to the entire thing, went to multiple schools, got a PhD, and chose to come back. I think that is the most powerful thing in here. He chose to come back, just like Bethany. That itself shows that this is a very good community and you want to be here. And talking about a couple of things that from the data we know that the longer you're in the school district, the better your outcomes are. So, you know, if they're joining, if they say that, oh, should I join now in kindergarten or should I come back later on? I say, join now. That's probably the very important thing to do. The second thing is we actually have a large percentage of black administrators, principals, and even teachers. Not as many teachers, would like to, you know, hire more, but that actually shows that our district is moving towards a more integrated view. And one final thing is we have 60% of kids taking AP, you know, in our schools. So that's a good thing.
Just to echo some of what's already been talked about, yeah, we have issues in this district. There's no denying that. But one of the things that makes me so proud to live here is that we confront our issues, right? And we take difficult steps to try to remedy what we see as problems. We have an integration initiative. How many other districts in New Jersey, in the country, have an integration plan like we do, or have even tried? And it's not something that just started a couple years ago. It's something we've been working out for a while. We have this organization, the Community Coalition on Race, that aims to try to address these issues in our schools and in our community. And it didn't get founded 2 or 3 years ago. It has a history that goes back decades. We have the Fergus recommendations, not entirely voluntarily. It's related to a court settlement, but we're committed to addressing those. We have committed ourselves to the task of racial justice and of remedying inequities in our schools. And so while we're certainly not perfect and we have a long ways to go, I'm proud of this community for putting that effort in.
Okay, Lydia.
I agree with a lot of what's been said here. You know, I think the experience in our district is varied. I think it varies family by family, student by student, and I think that's what we've been hearing when we've been on the campaign trail. It's serving some students of color, it's not serving others. It's serving some kids in special education, it's not serving others. It's serving some male athletes, it's not serving some female athletes. And so I think I totally agree that I think our community is amazing. And I think our community is willing to do the hard work of trying to lift up everyone and to meet everyone where they're at. And I think a lot of our platform is about providing the diverse offerings to all kids in our district. And no matter what level of course a child takes, they should be provided the skills necessary to succeed and be challenged. And they should be provided artistic opportunities, athletic opportunities, a variety of opportunities to grow as a whole person. And so I love our community. And yes, we have room to grow, but I would say yes, please move here and try and lift up with us.
I would probably end up asking a lot more questions. Where they're from, what's their family dynamic, what's their age, what's their background. I don't think these things are a monolith answer or even a question in that sense. So what I would probably also tell that family is that the community is going beyond black and white. Asian populations are on the rise, Hispanic populations on the rise, mixed race couples are on the rise. So I'd like to think that we can get to a spot where it isn't so binary in these things. And there is an opportunity for, depending on where they fit into that equation and depending on where they are. It's not for everybody. So I would also say for anybody who is, you know, a minority walking in here is find and hold on to your pride, right? Find a community, find a small group that you know that can relate to, work with, lean on as you assimilate into the rest of the society and stuff like that. As you're coming into the community, it's not easy moving into a new group, so it's easy to find the right communities, all the different groups that are out there, and all the support units.
All right, bringing up the rear. It's a really interesting question. We moved back here, I mentioned I grew up here. We moved back here in 2007 from Brooklyn and came here for the diversity. And I would certainly want to talk to this family about that, but I would be talking with them with the perspective of a white woman. And I, as a social worker, it's part of the framework that I'm thinking about. My experience is not, and my perception of a black community member's experience is just my perception. So it would be about connecting to resources, connecting to friends, neighbors, but just making sure that I understand what it is. You know, I'm a social worker, so I'm gonna ask all the questions. You know, what are you looking for? Why are you moving here? Where are you moving from? How old are the kids? What are they interested in? Are your kids queer? Are you, you know, like all of the different pieces that help to make up the fabric of a family, and make sure that they have access to everything that they need to feel welcome and successful.
Thank you for those thoughtful responses. Before we go to the next question, I'd like to remind all of you that as you hear the responses and the questions, there may be a question that comes up for you. And on your tables, we have put cards that you can jot them down while the thought is in your mind. Time will determine how many of those we'll be able to get to, but just wanted you to know that as we go forward. We'll move on to our third question, which is, we have a sizable population that does not speak English as a first language. How have you engaged Spanish, Haitian Creole, and other non-English speaking families during your campaign and or during your tenure on the board? And how would you continue to engage these constituents if elected? This is directed to Mr. Bimal Kapadia.
Okay, so I haven't engaged or haven't seen and had the opportunity to meet too many of the different varieties of all the backgrounds here, but we have come across many of the Hispanic families, Haitian communities over in H&A. We've met some folks. I would say that the best way to do this is to start with the hiring practices on the teachers of all the vacancies that we have, to have teachers that can look and sound and have the right support units for that. I mentioned also at the top that I'm a proponent of the arts, and I think the arts, music, even athletics, but honing in on the arts and music here is a universality that we can have. It's the expressions that you allow, that you don't need to know the language, you don't need to have the background. These things transcend. It's the most flexible, it's the most adaptable, it's the most it has the best ability to
We're on the QAB team. So, fun story. One of my very best friends, Maria Cristina Gonzalez Ruiz, moved here from Madrid with her family back in the 80s. And her first day of school, being primarily Spanish speaking, very little English, she was just thrown into class and had to just sink or swim. You know, being the 80s and being the fun people we taught her all of the really important words, and she went home and taught them to her siblings. The fact that we have ESL classes now, that we have supports in place for families that don't speak English as a first language, super important. And the fact that we're putting all of our communications from the district out with English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. And we're going to need to look at what other languages we need to start including as well. Those are not our only populations, and we need to just be respectful of that and inclusive.
I guess I'll just round it up. Yes, our website is in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. So that is something that's very important because we want everyone to be able to, be able to come to the website and learn about us. On the board, one of the things that we've done is, the district does put out communications in all three languages. One thing we made sure that also occurred in was for the experience survey for the Intentional Integration Initiative. We found it very important that we want as many families to participate as possible. And it's not just about the language, but also access to it. So one of the things that we advocated for was making sure that parents can take this survey not just online or through Power School, but also at locations that we set up, either at the district building or during events, because with that, by increasing the engagement, we can learn more, or we can increase the engagement from the community.
Our website's not available in Creole and Spanish by our own translation, but it is fully translatable on various web servers like Google, so anyone can access it. As for the campaign, I took Duolingo Spanish for over 4 years. I had a 1,300-day streak before my last Board of Ed campaign started. So I do actually very much enjoy, talking to people about the Board of Education in Spanish. The word I use for board is junta, so I like kind of saying that. As for a more serious point, the district's Hispanic population is growing very rapidly. It's gained, it's gone from 6% to 10% in the last few years. It's not as large as the New Jersey average, which is actually 34%, but it is growing rapidly. And I think actually educational programming and educational discussion around our Latino population is something that's going to be a much larger issue in the last few years. A decade ago, it was possible to talk about, it was never accurate, but it was possible to talk about the district as having black students and white students and not really reporting on other populations as much. I don't think that's something that's going to be appropriate in the next few years, very much longer. We do also remember that all our populations are internally diverse, and sometimes individual families have their own stories.
Hi, yeah, I think, on the campaign trail, I actually did reach out to my friends who are Hispanic and see if there was a Hispanic kind of parent group, and I couldn't find one. But if there is one, I would love, or even if there's not, I think on the board having parent liaison groups that kind of represent these different communities, I think would be a wonderful thing to bring on and have a way as to communicate with those groups. I think another thing we have to think about, kind of what Jeff was talking about, is that we also have a rise in Asian immigrants in our community, and so thinking about what languages might they speak. And I would love to see more outreach in terms of the surveys and town halls that we use to gather feedback from families. I was pretty disappointed with the III survey that went out. Our response rate was 200 people. And I think if we really want to know what's going on, especially, we have to do the effort of going out to families and trying to get their voices heard. And I don't think we've been doing enough of that. And that especially includes the voices of immigrant families. Thank you.
It's an important issue. The district has struggled in general with communicating with families. And of course, for families who don't speak English at home, that's an extra challenge for us. And Quali mentioned that the district puts out its written communications in English and as well as Spanish and Haitian Creole. But a lot of the communications that families want to have with teachers and school leaders is not going to be written necessarily. Parents, families are partners in the education of their kids, and parents who speak all languages need to know what's going on in the classroom and how they can support their own kids. I'll note also, if you look at our student performance report from the last year that it's out, the only demographic for which we did not meet our student growth goals was in English language learners. So this is, of course, a concern, and partly it's about recognizing your own blind spots. I don't speak Spanish or Haitian Creole, but that's why we've got to work together and make sure that we're reaching out to everybody in the community.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question, which is, the Coalition on Race is fully committed to integration and has been supportive of the Intentional Integration Initiative. Some criticism of the plan has centered around parents having a choice in the schools their children attend. What is your view? Do you support the integration plan in its totality? And this is directed to Dr. Telesford.
I fully support the integration initiative. We have to remember that integration is something this community has been doing for decades. We remember the Marshall Jefferson swap, now Bolden. It's something that we've changed the zoning, and it's never quite hit the mark, because no matter what, eventually segregation will come again, and then we'll have to figure out, okay, how do we swap these schools around to have an integrated system? We have the III now, and it's working. We have our schools reflect the community, and that's what we want. We can't just go to a choice model, because we have to recognize the fact that everyone is not going to have a choice, because there are areas of this community that are more remote. In this case, it'll be Newstead and the Hilton neighborhood. And if we had a choice model, those two communities would not fully have choices, so they would actually have to be the ones that carry the burden of integration. The great thing about this, I guess, the III is that we are all invested in it, and that's what we have to think about. We have to think about how does this affect our students? For our students, this is something that we see as great because what we believe is that the school should be reflective of the community, and all our schools are just one neighborhood, not these select neighborhoods around the community.
So Kwawi mentioned the Marshall Bolden project, and that actually started the year behind me when I graduated. So that was in the 80s. So we've been doing this a while, and we have something in place that is working. And do we need to work on logistics? Yeah, we can work on logistics. We need to talk to more families and find out what's working for them, what's not working for them. But to inject choice back into it is to take the initiative apart. And I just think that's completely unacceptable. It is a shared burden, although I don't like the word burden, but Kwawi and I have debated this. We have to all be committed to progress and to integration and equity. And when you give people the chance to opt out, for convenience sake, they may, and it defeats the purpose.
I would disagree that the III is a, quote, shared burden. Like, if you look at it in the level of, like, socioeconomic groups or racial groups, it might be, although it hasn't been. But the III is something you deal with actually as an individual household. It doesn't matter actually how the rest of your racial or socioeconomic tier is doing. You know, there are white families who, you know, are assigned to their closest school, but it's hard for them, maybe because the closest school starts at almost 9 a.m. There are black families who have a bus, and actually it's really bad for them because they can't even use a bus because they work long hours. I would disagree that there would be some kind of undue burden on Newstead or the Hilton neighborhood, because actually the percentage of kids who go to a certain school, it's not just set by the demographics, it's set by the size of the school relative to the population. So both the South Mountain School and now Seth Boyden actually have a lot more seats than they have kids. So actually they're importing schools. So actually the populations there would not have any undue burden. As for undoing it, that's totally false, because we are not going to change the plus or minus 5% seat control. That's what guarantees integration, not actually how parents like would rank schools, like 1, 2, 3 or not.
I agree with what Jeff was saying. I think you can have guardrails and protect the variance that we want to balance our schools, but you can also improve what we're doing. And just to clarify, right now our system does have quote unquote choice. It assumes that you want to be assigned to your home school. I don't think everyone wants to be assigned to their home school, because some schools start at 8 and some schools start at 9. So by having a choice, what we mean is just a ranking system. And that is actually what Berkeley does, which was what one of the schools systems that we modeled our school off of. So if you have a parent ranking choice, yes, parents still might get choice number 5, but at least the system is not making an assumption for you that might not be true. So I would support a system that doesn't make the choice for you that you want your homeschool. You can actually rank yourself. Then there can be a wait list based on that ranking. And then I would like to see some type of scrubbing of the data after assignments are placed to make sure that we can try and avoid isolated placements, because I do think that's detrimental to schools and to students. To costs, and also to students in isolated placements. And I believe we can do that while still keeping the variance that we all are trying to achieve with the rebalancing of schools.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow along with what my running mates are saying here, is that this policy, this initiative is a work in progress still. And I think when you asked your first question was, would you keep it as is, or would you introduce choice? I think choice is one of the factors. Is when you look into the data, when you look into 3 years of doing this right now, what are the best practices? What are lessons learned? What mistakes have we seen, and where do we go from here? It's what I mentioned before at the beginning, is feedback from the parents, feedback from the survey data that's going to be available soon, hearing from the teachers of what they're seeing on the front lines of this. These should all be variables that get and inputs that go into when you're thinking about how to make changes to a policy. Particularly also at the same time, demographics are changing over time here. So it needs to be something that's iterative, not fluid, iterative. So you're constantly making improvements to it. To make a change does not mean to unwind it.
So I very strongly support the integration initiative. I think it's important for advancing equity. And let's be clear, I don't believe anybody up here has taken the position that there can be literally no changes ever to the integration system. But for me, any changes need to, one, preserve the fundamental purposes of the integration system. Two, I'm very skeptical of changes that would, privilege parents that have certain knowledge or resources to navigate the system. So, and I also note, when we talk about changes to the integration system, this all needs to go through the ALVS group. It all needs to go through the superintendent. The Board of Education should not be making these changes unilaterally, because any change you make is going to have all kinds of knock-on effects. Let me say just one other thing. Sometimes when we talk about choice, there's been comparisons made to Montclair. What we need to recognize is Montclair's elementary schools are specialized, so there's like a science and technology elementary school, there's an arts elementary school. For understandable reasons, what choice and what transfers look like there might be different, so we don't want to compare apples to South oranges.
So the III, the resolution was passed in 2020, and we've had 3 years of continuous improvements, and we have 3 more years to go. And I mean, you cannot have intentional integration and neighborhood schools. That's just not an option. All schools are neighborhood schools. We do not have my favorite school here and not favorite school there. All schools look like our towns. It is actually, I would call, of all the programs we've had, it is a runaway success. Because our schools today are integrated. They look like our towns. We have 30% high socioeconomic status, 40% in the middle and 30 at the lower, and each school has that within a 5% variation. So that is what I would love to see, is all schools PTAs be equally affluent. That's one of the problems we've had. I mean, I was hoping that, with this readjustment that would happen automatically, but I still believe there are some ways to go there.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. Racial disparities in discipline continue to be an issue here. Why do you believe that is? What policies would you propose to address this, and how would you track and measure their effectiveness? This is directed to Ms. Deidre Brown.
I would, in terms of the question of why do I think there is inequities in discipline, I think that's happening. That happens nationally. Certainly, students of color and male students are disproportionately affected by punishments. They have more punishments. Their punishments are harsher than their peer counterparts, and so I would guess that some of it's systemic, and we're seeing that in our own district, despite our best efforts and intentions. I certainly support our district's efforts for restorative justice. I've been to one of the sessions led by Dr. Gilbert. I think that's a great step forward. In terms of monitoring practices, I'm not entirely sure what data the board collects, but I absolutely believe that we should be collecting data to understand what are the punishments that are being doled out to our students, what are they for, who's making them. And I would also be in support of maybe some type of institutional review board to enforce the code of conduct, but also to prevent any biases from occurring when it is implemented. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
So why do I think that happens? I think that we have a very racist system. I don't really know how to say it nicer. Young men of color in particular are disproportionately punished. But the question for me is, can we back that out, and where did we fail them? Because an incident at school was probably precipitated by other things. And who was paying attention, and who was there for that child, and who was helping? Is there domestic violence at home? Is there food insecurity? Do we have a homelessness issue? Is there a parent who's sick at home? Are they living with family? I mean, there's so many. I'm sorry to pick it apart, again, as a social worker, but that's my entire framework at times, is to say, where did we fail and how do we do a better job supporting all of our students?
Yeah, that's all right. I think when you're looking at what's happening in the school district, yes, I believe it's also just an unfortunate reflection of what's happening in the rest of society. However, we should be looking at the data. We should be looking at what's happening, who's being targeted, when, why, how, what are the circumstances of which it's happening. Are the teachers getting enough training behind it? Is there anti-bias training? Do they have blind spots? Is there professional development that we should be looking at? But I think there's also an element here of early interventions as much as we can get into this, right? I imagine that a lot of this stuff is happening in the later stages of schooling here, but if you can get into the early interventions of what's happening both in the monitoring, the screening of both at the academic level, at the arts level, at the G&T level, at the special education level, all these things are meant to be help to foster the love of learning and not have it so it could be lost.
At the last board meeting in October, I've lost track of time. Yes, in October, beginning of October, we had a presentation on the HIB reports and the number of incidences by school, and it's very clear that majority of them happen in Columbia High School. Now, I don't know if it's causation or correlation, but again, this goes back to the longevity in the school district. So that could be one of the reasons. But on the board, I mean, I have been part of a group that's made sure that we do not want any armed policemen in the school district. I mean, yes, we want to have as many suspensions in school as opposed to out of school. That's actually a very good thing. And we've actually made plans to improve security. We have ID cards. And something as simple as making sure that freshmen eat lunch in school and don't get to go out just reduces the number of fights that happen. So, sometimes very simple implementation details kind of help out a lot.
Like Paul, Steve, and I did have a career as a public school teacher. I taught at a high school, and I saw kids get suspended. 1 day, 2 day, 5 days. And, it is a major problem. It's a problem for them because actually they lose their place in school. They fall behind academically. If the sports team they're on is really important to them, they miss practice that. So suspensions are bad, period. I do think they are sometimes necessary, but it's something that actually we should orient our schools around avoiding. I think there are a few ways we can try to avoid that. This is something that, SEL, social emotional learning, can be employed. We need to work with teachers and counselors actually on how to get kids actually to avoid actually fights and actually losing their temper or anything. We need to support teachers. Sometimes actually our teachers go through education school with very little training on classroom management. And if we actually get teachers better at that, we can actually avoid the larger infractions that might lead to a suspension. I think that the Columbia High School Code of Conduct, when I read it, it actually does try to get things right, but I have to respect the time.
So there's been some mention of data. I mean, the data is stark. So if we look at suspensions, for example, 70% of suspended students are black. Black students make up more than half of the suspensions in this district, to take one piece of that data. I appreciated what Bethany said about supporting students. Lots of students have behavioral issues. If every kid had intrinsically the skills and behaviors they needed to succeed, there would be no need for a public school system. And so students who are having trouble in any way, in behavioral ways and other ways, need the support of our district and our community. I appreciated what Deirdre said about restorative justice practices. That's something that we're starting to implement. I think that's a step in the right direction. And again, we can look back at the data. If you look just this last year, SOMS had 11 suspensions, Maplewood Middle School had 3. Maybe that's a blip in the data. Maybe this was kind of a weird year, but maybe there's something we can learn from that. Let's look at the data we have. Let's follow up and see if we can do better.
I think this is one of those areas where I'm actually happy about what the district has. This past week, I went to the Community Advisory Board for the Loft, which is kind of the social-emotional learning hub of Columbia High School. There's also the hub at Maplewood Middle School. And this is a place that students can go where they have a safe space. It's where they focus on counseling, mental health, and it's focusing on students that might be at risk. And it's grant funded, and I think that that is one area where I think our school district should find ways to increase the funding, expand its access so that maybe we can have it at South Orange Middle. They had 11 suspensions. Maplewood Middle had 3. Maybe programs like the Hub and the Loft are instrumental to that. So I think that's one thing that we can do is increase the funding and support for the things that we already have here in the district.
Thank you very much. We're coming in the home stretch with our questions that have already been pre-developed. And I want to remind you that if you have a question that you'd like to have considered, please just hold your card up. We've got people, Megan in particular, who will be looking to grab your card and bring them over. We will be... Oh, yes, please put your name on it. I believe we're going to have you to come up and ask your own question. The only sorting we will be doing is by category. So we've got 3 questions that are in the same category. We're going to pull 1 question from that category first time through. So you can pass those over. Let's move on to the next question. Our school district has experienced more than its share of disruption and instability. I think we'll all agree to that, which has interrupted much of the equity work the district has committed to. What specific strategies will you use to refocus the district on its equity work so that every child, regardless of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and economic circumstance, can achieve their full potential? And this is directed to Ms. Bethany Joseph.
As soon as you started reading a really long question, I knew it was going to be for me. And I won't ask for it to be repeated. Yeah, we've had a lot of disruption. We've had a lot of upheaval. And I'm actually going to flip this around again and talk about community just for a second. A lot of that responsibility falls on everybody in this room. It's not a responsibility that we can lay at the feet of any one particular board of education that has sat over the last 10 years. The way that we have been interacting is disruptive, and we've not been focused on the kids. So how do we get back to equity work? We need to support Mr. Bing and our new staff that are coming in. We need to continue to fill those positions and support them and not overstep the bounds of what the board should and needs to be doing. And we need to spend more time, honestly, like just making sure that our instructors, that our administrators have what they need so that we can build on the stability that Kwawi and Arun have started. When you have stable footing, you can build. If we're constantly in upheaval, it's just putting out fires.
I think a lot of that is exactly right. And actually, at the first candidate forum, Arun talked about urgent versus important. And one problem we have had is that we have these emergencies and things come up, and those are urgent, and they can distract us from important things, like the opportunity gap, which is a long-term, stubborn problem that requires our attention. In terms of stability, we've had just so much turnover in the upper levels of leadership. We've got to make sure that our leaders want to stay here, and that it's a lot of that, not all of it, is about how the Board of Education relates to those leaders. We've got to make this a place where people want to work, right, where they feel that they can collaborate with the board, not a place where the board is going to look to blame them when things go wrong. And part of that is the board has to speak with one voice, all 9 members of the board. I'm running not with anybody else, and I think partly because of that, I hope I can come in, if I'm elected, equipped to try to work across the board and unite us.
Unfortunately, our district does face a larger number of controversies than most other districts, crises if you want to call them. Each of these crises is unique, actually. You know, they sometimes rhyme with what's happened before, but they're very hard to predict. And sometimes the result of just like an action by a single teacher or other staff member or a single student. A crisis that I think we can predict is budget crisis. We should know that our next budget is going to be very difficult. Our state aid increase will be very small. We're going to have a large increase for teacher salaries. We're going to have a large increase for electricity. We're going to have a large increase for healthcare. We're going to have a large increase for transportation. The next budget is going to be bad. We need to get ready for the next budget now. That's a crisis we can address. That's a crisis the board should have a large role in. You know, I've called before for actually some savings. You know, we can actually spend less money on pre-K busing, reallocate some of that to K-5 busing so the buses aren't so late. We can use our additional space from the LRFP actually to bring in more revenue and actually to save money. And actually, I'm even willing to do what Westfield did and actually move the election to April to get around the tax cap. I don't think 2% is sustainable in an era of high inflation, and 2.5%, 3% I think would be okay for the community overall. Time's up.
First, want to say that moving our election will not get us around the tax cap because we have a Board of School estimate, so we still have to get approval to go above the cap. But the question was about access and equity and how do we maintain the focus on that. And that is by supporting the administration and not trying to place blame or find scapegoats whenever there are problems. Because yes, there are crises, but whenever we have a crisis, it's how do we navigate that. The main thing is to first assess it, work with administration and say, okay, what support do you need, and then provide that support. One of the major ways that we can do this is support our Assistant Superintendent of Access and Equity, Dr. Gilbert. He's done some great work, and we have to continue supporting him on as he is navigating and providing. Like we pulled him from his position, remember, so that he could be acting superintendent, and that has actually impacted the work we're doing. So we need to make sure that we have a stable administration and continue to support everyone that's in those positions, and that's how we can actually move forward and continue. Thank you.
The biggest risk to access and equity, in my opinion, to echo Jeff here, is the budget that we have in front of us. Without the proper budget management, the managing of the cuts that we fell into this year with the staff cuts, the program cuts, and everything that we have in there, these are the things that could impact access and equity the most. So what we do have the opportunity, though, is to hopefully cauterize it, keep an eye on it, have the right financial acumen for it, multi-year forecasting, all these things that should be the basics. But we have a new superintendent, we have a fresh start, we have hopefully new elected board members to come in here. And I think the main thing here is to reestablish the trust with the community, the students, the teachers, the district overall. That means it's accountability, it's transparency, it's proper oversight, it's honesty, and it's having the leadership reflect what we want out of the district, and that's going to be a trickle down while we are a sentinel for the Access and Equity program.
I agree with a lot of what's been said, especially the figuring out our budget. Without a sound budget and without multi-year planning for our budget, we're not going to be able to make progress on any of the equity recommendations. And along with the budget, we should have a strong strategic plan. I'm glad that Dr. Bing has a strategic plan he's put into place. He is using the equity audit recommendations as well as the special education recommendations to be part of the foundation of that strategic plan. And I think as a board, we should be asking questions in terms of, are we allocating the budget in a manner that implements that strategic plan? And by doing that, we should therefore then be implementing these important equity recommendations. Also, making sure that we have proper staffing so that we can fulfill our harassment and bullying policy, and making progress on these important initiatives that we can't wait any longer to make progress on. Thank you.
So this is a little bit of a red herring when you blame everything on the strategic plan and the budget. I will go out and say that it has nothing to do with stability. Stability has been a problem because of the board, all of us, 9 people sitting on the board. They go and meddle in things they should not. They go and fire people when they should not. They go and put people on leaves when they should not. We had a strategic plan in 2016 with Dr. Ramos, and we immediately fired him. So, I mean, what good does a strategic plan do? So stability is probably the most important thing that is needed, not only for the well-being of the district, well-being of the students, access, equity, any of those things that you look at, long-term projects, stability is it. And it's so important, that's why we put it as part of our slogan. You know, it's community, collaboration, and stability. And that's probably the most important thing that we need to have.
Okay, that's everyone on that one. And now we have our last question. Our last question before closing statements, and then time permitting, we'll be able to entertain questions from all of you. The last question is, for candidates who have served on the Board of Education, what do you consider your greatest accomplishment? And for those of you running for the first time, how do you hope to be able to answer that question in 3 years' time? This is directed initially to Mr. Arun Balamani.
So, I mean, I kind of answered my question with my opening statement. I gave a list of maybe a dozen of things I'm very proud of. And we have more good than bad. We have more positives than negatives. It's just that we like to show off our, I guess, I don't know why, our bad side. That's okay. It's fine. We'll fix it. The things that are extremely important that we've done over the last 3 years is, I'll just pick one example. You know, I have 60 seconds. Is that in the first year, we came up with the Special Education Committee. We voted for that. It was an ad hoc committee. In the second year, Dr. Kwabito Elliswood was the chair for that. In the third year, we actually paid money for an external auditor to come and look at our services and come up with a plan and show what the deficiencies are. And now, we realize there are problems, so what we've done is we moved the Special Education Committee to be a full committee. So what the board is saying is it is as important as curriculum, as FFT, as personnel, and policy. And what we're doing right now is making steady improvements based on the roadmap. So that is probably what I'm extremely happy about.
My biggest accomplishment when I was on the board is actually something that I had a role in finishing after my board term, and that's successfully becoming an activist for a fair state aid distribution in New Jersey. And in 2013, this district only got 25% of its recommended state aid, and there were districts getting as little as 10% of their recommended state aid. At the time, though, you could not find a single journalist or elected official who could explain what was going on. I called college professors who couldn't explain what was going on. It took a couple of years to learn, actually, the simple fact that New Jersey's state aid law was just frozen, and the only thing that determined how much aid a district got was what it got the year before. It was a very hard struggle to explain to journalists, elected officials, and other boards of education how bad it was. When I would email other boards of ed, and there were hundreds, sometimes they would say things, we knew we were under-aided, but we thought everyone was. We had no idea how unfair it was. It took years to overcome, actually, the fact that we had to get out that there was such a thing as capped aid versus uncapped aid. I can't explain that now. But the real deficit was $2 billion, and there was no way we were ever going to fully fund all districts based on the original intention of SAFRA from 2008. We got Steve Sweeney on our side, and there was reform in 2018, and $1.5 million comes to this district that wouldn't come here otherwise.
I would say what I'm most proud of is the fact that we had a unanimous vote for the superintendent, which we did not have in our previous superintendent. When I began my second year, we saw people that held committee chairs were removed from those positions, and we saw a board that became very fractured. And even up until the December when they chose the superintendent search firm, basically trying to box out the incoming board or the incoming leadership. And when I came into leadership, I could have just said, okay, then I'm going to box you out too. And I said, no, we can't have that. We have to work together. We can be fractured and still come together and work together. So we said, okay, let's make sure that we share power by including, the other side to our executive board. Also in our superintendent search liaison group, we had, other sides so that we could all participate. And we saw that the community really responded well to that. And look, we now have a superintendent that we all support, a unanimous vote, and I think that that's partly because of the idea of how do we collaborate with each other.
I've never served on the board, so I would hope in the next 3 years If we can get the climate and the temperature of the community down a bit, the board reflecting the right temperament that we need to have in terms of collaboration, that's a win. If we can be allowing the super to focus on educational programming and not putting out fires, that's a win. What I would like to do from a very tactical, policy perspective, if and when the board is involved, is I would like to see the teachers brought into the decision-making process. We heard in a SOMEA meeting not too long ago that they haven't been brought into any of the policy discussions since 2020. That's a really easy thing to fix, and I think that is a step towards improving teacher morale. Improving teacher morale, that's better student outcomes, that's better teaching in the classroom, and a good path towards the whole student of what we're talking about: academics, arts, special education, VOTEC, whatever it may be.
The question asked, what would I want my greatest accomplishment to be if I'm on the board? I don't necessarily think about it in terms of individual accomplishments. The reality is that the Board of Education, a single member of the Board of Education, can do some bad by themselves, but almost no good by themselves. So I hope to stand before you in 3 years talking not about I, but about we. I want to be able to say that we as a board spoke with one voice. I want to be able to say that we listened to each other. I want to be able to say that we have the same superintendent that we do right now. I want to be able to say that we have the same special services department that we just started with and have been newly hired. I think that's what we really need to be aiming for, is for the board to unite, to have a picture of what its role is, what the superintendent's role is, and have folks working together for the betterment of our students.
I 100% agree with that. It's 9 people sitting on that dais. So from my perspective, in 3 years, I'd like to have people say, oh, you're on the board? I don't actually know who's on the board anymore. Board meetings are boring and nobody attends them. That would be kind of awesome. I hope everybody knows who the superintendent is and supports him. I would love to have 8 cell phone numbers in my cell phone, because we all get along at least well enough to be able to be in touch with each other before and after meetings, so that we're not in a place where we need to be arguing in public. That we can keep things a civil discourse, and that we can disagree without it becoming World War III.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's been said, especially the taking down of temperature and bringing back in the community of teachers and parents and students. I think we have some challenges in our district, and it's going to take all of us working together to address them. I want to just make it clear that while some of you have stability in your slogan, that certainly doesn't mean that we are not for stability. I think we all, I'll speak for myself anyway, would love to have our superintendent and much of his administration, if not all of his administration, in place. We certainly want to have teachers that feel valued, and so we retain them. That is what stability is, and I believe that working together, that is what we can create. And so I don't want the narrative to be taken away that we don't want stability. And in fact, I think that is what we want. I think getting back to basics is a lot of what we're striving for, so that we can become a stable district and then begin to address our challenges. Thank you.
That's everyone? Great. So that ends the questions. I think you will agree, great questions put together on the community's behalf by our schools committee. And before we go into closing statements, we now are going to entertain some of your questions. And what I'm going to do is call the name of the person, and we're going to let you come to the mic and read your own question. It does not need to be directed, or should not be directed, to any one particular person. Anyone can respond, but you'll have up to a minute, a maximum, with your response. I'm going to call the first person up, and then I'm going to call the second person to be on deck. The first person is Abigail Murtaugh. I hope I said that properly. Thank you, Abigail. And then next up will be Kelly Quirk.
Hi, thank you. What is one specific step you would take as a board member, specific, to safeguard the equity gains our district has made? And what specific step would you take to further those gains? Thank you.
Anyone?
I'll go ahead and jump right in. One step to safeguard our equity gains. We need to keep having conversations like these. We need to be very open with one another and talk about our successes. We spend a great deal of time talking about the things that some of us think are failures and other people don't, and we argue back and forth, but I think we can agree that equity is an incredibly important goal and that we're not there yet. So as we have gains, I think we need to celebrate them. I think we need to spend time talking about them. How did we achieve it? And how can we work together to build on that, again, as a community? You know, Arun said it a little while ago, you know, community collaboration and stability. That's how we're going to grow. That's how we're going to get these things moving, continually moving forward.
And I just want to interject that everyone need not respond, but if you feel that there's something you'd like to say in response to the question, please do. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question. We have quite a few here.
Right, I'll go. I think one thing we have to make sure when we talk about equity is that it is not confined to like a specific department or an idea or project or program. We have to make sure that equity is a part of all of our committees. So one way that I would continue to make sure that we keep our gains going is that make sure that equity discussions is occurring in every single committee, and that we recognize that, you know, our assistant superintendent of access and equity is available in all these realms, so that we don't, you know, just treat it as, well, we did some work there, so now we can ignore it. We have to make sure that that discussion is continuous and is part of everything that the board is doing.
I agree with that, and I'll just add on that I think specific to the equity recommendations by Dr. Fergus, I do believe we should have a standing committee on the Board of Education that really focuses, and it can pull in from the work of the other committees, but really does focus on making a roadmap for continuing progress in this area. And so I'd like to see more effort in that area.
So this is one of the few times I'm actually going to scare you, okay? This has nothing to do with Fergus recommendations, Rutgers thing. The only way the gains will continue to be made and not fall back is when it all depends on all of you. It depends on who you vote for, it depends on who we put on the board, because there have been many instances where it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's happened before, intentionally, non-intentionally, I don't know. I cannot guess to the intentions. But the only way we compound our growth and have a good, nice, steady graph going up is when the right people are sitting together, talking about it, and there is pressure from the community to do the right thing.
Any other responses to that question?
Let me just add quickly, when we're talking about having those conversations, I'm sure other people would agree, teachers need to be part of that conversation. You know, board meetings last, 5 hours on a bad day. 3 now, okay, thank you. Teachers are in the classroom 6 or 7 hours a day, and you bet that they're thinking about their students even after that and doing work outside of the school hours. So they're real experts and a real source of knowledge in terms of how do we actually take these important goals and make sure they translate into the classroom.
Any other responses to that question?
I would like to see more of an effort of the arts and the athletics being integrated into the equity programs. I mean, I understand we all talk about the steps and the recommendations that are out there, but I do believe that between music, between painting, between performances, it is the best vehicle of community and unity that we have in our district. And that is something that we haven't seen that in the curriculum. We know that is the most malleable. We know it's the most flexible. It's the most nimble. and we shouldn't be seeing cuts in the arts and the athletics programs to do that, because it's academics is only a certain path to it. I know we're always taken for granted it's everything, but when you have cuts of the arts and you have cuts of the athletics, it's a disproportionate impact, particularly in the arts when we're all cutting supplies and all that stuff. So that is one way that I believe that we can actually showcase a lot of path towards the equity.
Any other responses?
When we talk about equity in this district and structural disadvantages that some people face, some kids face, it's been very centered on leveling and G&T. But I think something we've kind of neglected is curriculum. You know, the importance of having a content-rich curriculum that will teach kids about the world, teach kids about nature, teach kids about, you know, history. I think that's really neglected on the elementary level. I think that actually, you know, having content knowledge is necessary for reading comprehension, and we shouldn't be shy about that. I think that the district's whole language program, which lasted through the early 2000s, and then balanced literacy, I think it was actually bad for kids from every population, but it's particularly bad for kids from like less advantaged populations too. So I think actually we do have to look out make sure that the district actually does continue to adhere to phonics, because I think there is something kind of in the DNA in the district which is very resistant to that, based on how long it's taken us to adopt it. Also for equity, I think, you know, we do have to look at the budget actually, because the district runs on money, and like we need to actually have the money for equity.
All right, yeah, while we have a workforce diversity initiative or action plan, I do want to see that it becomes more robust and that we really do recruit from within the state, because right now a lot of that's going to be focused on HBCUs. And when I think of places like Rutgers, Montclair State, Kane, all these local universities that are within the state have large populations of black students that could come and be teachers here. And so that's going to be something that's going to be very important when we talk about diversifying our workforce, because we want, you know, our classrooms to reflect the community, but we also want our students to see teachers that look like them also in the classroom.
So I believe that learning does not only happen in classrooms. I mean, it happens everywhere. It happens in corridor. It happens with, you know, affinity groups. It happens across the world. So across, not the world, but whatever. That's our system, right? But one thing I would definitely like to increase is the participation in MAC. I mean, MAC is a super success that we have. It's the Minority Achievement Club, and it is great because it not only helps kids get self-esteem, talk, volunteer, get prep for SAT and essay writing, and currently it's limited to, I believe, only 100. And you know, we have about 30–40% of our kids who are of color. I mean, that's leaving out a huge chunk. I would love to see MAC at least doubled or tripled.
While Kathy's coming to the mic, the next person on deck would be Karma Van Allen. Karma? Excellent.
Hi. Could you please tell us something about our district that you think is a success?
I can't give just a single thing, so I'll give 3 things. If you're the volunteerism in this community is amazing. Like, you know, our children are here at Marshall School, and like I'm always amazed at everything that PTA does. I have done lunchtime duty, and it's so wonderful to see actually all these parents around like helping kids. It's great to be able to help the kids yourself. You know, there's always people to help. Like 2 years ago, when we had a lot of trouble getting my daughter to school because my work schedule and the school started so late, there was a woman who just volunteered to like walk my daughter to school. Like, that's wonderful. I also think that at Columbia, like, the sky's the limit. Like, if a student is motivated, there's almost nothing a student can't do. And that doesn't go for every high school. Also, I think this is a town, a community that's very non-judgmental. If someone's a student here and they march to the beat of a different drummer in some way, I think this is an excellent school to be at. I think it's less cliquey. I think the kids are nicer. Not perfect, but like, I think the kids are nicer, and this is a good school to, you know, express yourself in. Thank you.
I think that we should be exceptionally proud of all of the different pathways that we provide to our students. And that goes from ESS program that helps kids just get to school when we're going through school refusal with them, all the way through, are you going to go to college? Are you going to take a gap year? Are you going to go work? Because not everybody goes to college. My younger brother did not leave Columbia High School in the class of '89 and go off to college, and he's now a successful restaurant owner, and, you know, much to my mother's delight, and we like to tease her that she pushed for college. You know, vocational training, there's a path for everybody, and I think that that is something that we should be very, very proud of.
I think the various routes of expression that all the students have the opportunity to get to across all the different, the wide variance of offerings that we have is something that's tremendous. In terms of the schools that I've been to and seen, or other friends I know, the more I learn about what the high school can offer, it's pretty amazing if you can get your hands on it, right? One of the favorite things, though, while it's a success, because I enjoy going to it, is the Maker's Madness that we have every year. That is something that's absolutely incredible to see the kids' innovation, the inventions that they make, the expression that they can do these things, and all the parents and the teachers that are participating in it. That's something that I never heard of until a few years ago, but my family has gone every year, and that's something where you should just be incredibly proud of those students, what they could pull off.
I would say probably the most important thing is when your child goes off to college or they go to a job, when they leave Columbia High School, they leave well-rounded. And I think that's one of the greatest thing about our high school is that you go to college and then you say, wow, everyone seems kind of behind to me. And that's partly because a testament to this community, a testament to our schools, and that we really truly prepare our students for life. And I think that's one of the best things about our school district.
To echo what some other folks have said, I mean, our students are just remarkable, and not just academically. You know, we have students going off to the best colleges in the country every single year. We have student athletes who go on to compete in the Olympics. We have a district that really values the arts and has just remarkable student performances. And just to add, we've talked a little bit about board meetings, and often the bright spot of those board meetings is seeing our students. I'm just always so impressed by students who want to get involved and speak up for what they believe in, whether that's in national issues or in local issues. You know, I think our students just do the adults proud all the time, and I think that's really the jewel of our entire district.
This is a really great question. Thank you for asking it. It's so fun. I agree with a lot of what's been said. I would be remiss not to mention the teachers. I think we've had some incredibly talented and devoted teachers in our district, especially, you know, the past 5 years have been really hard. They've been hard for teachers, parents, students, and the teachers have stood by. And so I know my kids have had some wonderful teachers, and I'm very grateful for them. The high school musical, definitely a highlight of our community. I've been taking my kids there before they were even in high school, and every time I go, I am just blown away. And I think it's such a great example of the talent of our community coming together and creating something like larger than our community in a way. And I would love to see that in more areas in our district. And I've got to give a shout out to Special Dance.
Excellent. Can we move on? Arun, did you want to respond?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of dozen I am proud of. I cut it down to like only 4 each. So I want to add 3 more to my list of what I'm proud of. I'm proud that for the second year in a row, CHS received the AP Gold status. I mean, that's just awesome. That's very, very cool. This one is not, I am extremely proud that we invented Ultimate here. I mean, I know it sounds like, some game that, kids play in a parking lot, but it is very cool. It's for all the people who don't want to play football or, get bashed in the head. I mean, that's a great game, right? And the final thing I'm actually very proud of is the number of BOE candidates we always have. We are always oversubscribed. That means we have more people running for fewer seats. My sister-in-law lives in Baskin Ridge, and they can barely get one for 3 open seats. And maybe we should export a couple from here to there, you know? So.
Thank you. As Karma comes up to the mic, Daniel Wright, will you be on deck? Are you still with us? Great.
Good evening. I'm a 20-year South Orange resident whose kids have been in the district since kindergarten. My youngest son is now a senior at CHS. While our experience with the SOMSD schools has been overwhelmingly positive, there is a part of me that's ready to breathe a huge sigh of relief to graduate from the ongoing and seemingly endless cycle of chaos and divisiveness that plagues our district. If elected, what will you do and how will you work collaboratively to change this culture of never-ending drama so that all of our beautiful students can thrive and succeed?
I think one of the most important things that board members need is training. One of the things that I've committed to this year is, making sure that our quarterly retreats truly focus us on what is your role as a board member. We have a retreat coming up in November. We're going to be focusing on budget and what is the board's role in that. Because I think is the most important thing is do you understand your role as a board member? And if you truly understand your role as a board member, then it really makes collaboration easy. Because I think a lot of the discussions or disagreements come about because people have opposing ideas of what are we supposed to actually do as a board. So once we actually have a foundation of what is our role as board members, I think that we can increase collaboration and have much more boring meetings.
First of all, Carmen, I'm sorry that you feel that your son's graduation is partly a relief and not just a pure excitement. We do need to get better at working with each other and relating to each other. I'm the only independent candidate up here. I don't have running mates. If I'm elected, I'm going to be the only board member that didn't run with somebody. And I'm really committed to working with everybody else. Over the course of this campaign, I've gotten to know everybody up here. I was texting with a few of them earlier today. I won't embarrass them by identifying them. But I really want to try to show up and have us work with each other. And part of how I try to do that is I really believe that everybody who runs for the board has the best interests of our kids at heart. We might come at it from different perspectives, have some different ideas, but you've got to keep in mind that nobody goes through this whole thing if they don't really care about the future of our kids in this district.
Unfortunately, our school district has had a lot of friction in the last few years, and I do want to see the temperature come down and, us have more faith in the district and the board and more harmony. I do want to say, I think I'm one of those people who's been text messaging you today. Like Paul and I have been text messaging since the start of, August, I think. So, we've talked about a lot of issues on the campaign in a very friendly way. Paul is very polite, and I think he will be on the Board of Education. He's a few. But anyway, about that. When you're on the Board of Education, you do have to get along with everyone very well, and you have to understand that the Board of Education has a very limited bandwidth, unfortunately. There might be something that all board members in the administration want to do, but you may not actually have the time to do it, actually. You kind of have to wait for the right moment. If there's something that you feel that we're not doing, actually, try to find out what other districts are doing with it, see if they have success, and see if we can import it here. In my first year, I'd like to work on some unifying things, like the budget is going to be a problem, enrolling it together. I also hope to get us to pass a resolution on a fair equalization aid for the state. I don't know why anyone would disagree with that. It's irrationally unfair to us, and that's a unifying cause.
I was going to say the best way to bring back sort of bring down the temperature, as we said, or the divisiveness, is we have to have the super and the board reflect the temperament, the leadership, the style, the spirit of collegiality, and the outreach that we should display, and that what we expect from the community. Sounds basic, right? But it's actually been a really hard thing for us to achieve these last few years. I think it starts with communication. It starts with transparency. It starts with over communication. Mr. Bing's off to a great start with the amount of communication that he's been doing to date. And I think the Board of Ed members, I think the parents, the district, we should all be open to having more and more of these types of forums. And as a board, knowing its roles and its purpose, but I think it's also got an implicit role of trying to bring the community closer, being a listening vessel for parents, for students, for folks who haven't been heard before, and teachers.
Yeah, sorry. I agree with a lot of that. I think, speaking for myself, if I was elected to the board, one of the first things I would do is ask every board member out to coffee, because I think we need to start just kind of getting to know each other on a personal level. And, we would all be colleagues. And like any, professional setting, you want to get to know your colleagues and find commonalities. And I think if we do that, then we can work together. We're all not going to agree. And I think that we probably all shouldn't agree, because some of the best ideas come from diversity in thought. But we do need to show respect when we don't agree and come to common understanding, at least, if not common agreement. The other thing, I do think we are in this period of needing to over-explain as members of the board and the superintendent, because trust is so low in our district. So I think in board meetings, trying to be as transparent as possible, over-explaining why certain decisions are made, just so we can get to a point of people having faith in the board and the district again.
So, I want to dispel this myth that, the board is filled with a bunch of people who hold hands and have wine and cheese every day. That's not how it is. I've talked to people on the board since the early 90s, okay? And there have always been factions. Factions are not going to disappear. So let's be practical about it. Yes, we have factions. There are people but they're all well-meaning people. So there are people who believe we need to go here. Some people we need to go here. I commit to the fact that I'm going to involve everyone from any faction into making sure that we are part of the majority and we move forward. That's, I think, very crucial, is to have diversity of thought, not just from people in the community, but also on the board to pull people in.
Okay, this is exciting to hear from so many of you, and we have 3 more questions that we're going to work in before we go to closing statement. As Daniel's coming forward, I'm going to ask if Gavin Height, I hope I said that correctly, is still with us. Please come forward.
Hi, thanks. After the recent multi-million-dollar budget shortfall that led to the elimination of 28 jobs and teacher layoffs, how do we do better next year? Would you have supported the renewal of the previous business admin? And if you did, why? How will you work with the next super and the next BA to improve our budget process?
So let's get some basic things out of the way again, myths again, right? Yes, we had a projected budget deficit. We do not have a current budget deficit. We are not East Orange. We are not Nutley. We can make our payroll. So what happened is, when the costs are going up and teachers are being hired and the enrollment is going down, at some point, you have to admit to the fact that we have too many teachers. That's the fact of life. So now, if this was a corporation like Goldman Sachs or Bank of America where I work, you would have layoffs every year. We don't do that. That's not how we want to work. So we kind of continue and try to work with it as much as we can till we cannot. And talking about renewal of the BA, of course I voted yes. I think getting rid of the BA caused more instability in our district than anything else. We've lost 11 administrators in the last few months, and we haven't even hired them back. And that has caused equity issues, name a problem, and it's come from there.
I think one thing to consider when you have a recommendation from the superintendent is to understand why they're making that recommendation. The board really shouldn't be in this position of saying, well, I want to hire and fire certain people, because when the board is in that position, it undermines the superintendent. And when you have to recognize that it's not only within the district that you have to worry about, you have to worry about what's happening outside the district, the prospective people that want to come here. And that's something that we actually have trouble with, is because people look at how our board acts and they say, okay, they're a little crazy. I don't think I want to work there. You have administrators that, look, I want to actually just get to next year. So some say, you know what, this district has too high a temperature, so I'll either move on, or I just want to accept the position. And so we have to really think about those cascading effects. As Arun said, we had 11 administrators leave, and we were able to fill some of those positions, but there are some positions that we still have trouble filling, and that mostly is because of the idea of whether do we have a supportive board, and so we have to think about that.
Arun, you said something interesting when the analogy to Goldman Sachs for if there was a budget shortfall, you'd have layoffs. We did have layoffs. 28 teachers got laid off. That is a repercussion of what happened. Paraprofessionals got cut. Cuts to the program, supplies. These things did happen. And if I was a BA in a Goldman Sachs and I came out with a budget shortfall, they would be removed from a job. I mean, I think that's, again, I'm using your analogy that you said here in the private sector, which I don't think is too dissimilar to what happens here in the district.
I think last year's budget actually, was really a disaster in terms of the fact that we had no idea that there was a budget crisis coming before the winter, and it couldn't be explained actually even once it broke. Other districts who were gaining state aid were fine, but we were laying off 28 full-fledged staff, 70 paraprofessionals, eliminating bus aides. I think actually it really was a bad process. The Board of Education should not interfere with personnel like 99% of the time. It should ratify whatever the superintendent wants. And I did that to controversy when I was on the board the first time. I voted to hire a director of special services, because I believed in policy governance. But unfortunately, the old BA actually did make such huge mistakes. It wasn't just in the budget, it was also in transportation. We had 2 years of transportation mess. We had 600 unassigned seats in 2022-23, and then in 2023-24, we had mass lateness for months. When he made the presentation to the BOSC on busing, he also did not disclose how much pre-K busing we were going to have too. So it was really a false presentation. The graceful thing would have been for the BA to be asked to resign by the superintendent, but because that didn't happen, I think he did need to be non-renewed. But
I think this is a key point where we have a different definition of stability. I don't think that keeping someone who clearly, is not performing at their job is stabilizing for the district. The BA did not warn us of the budget deficit, couldn't explain it. We still don't understand it to this day. And in a meeting said that they could not forecast out 3 to 5 years. And I would not have voted to retain the BA, let alone give the BA tenure. I also think it's destabilizing to vote to renew a superintendent whose almost entire administration left under him, which is destabilizing, and the teachers overwhelmingly voted no confidence in. And that, to me, that's destabilizing. That person is destabilizing. So why would you keep someone who is clearly not stabilizing? And so I think we just have fundamental differences about what is stable for our district. And absolutely, I am committing to support our leadership, our current leadership.
Thank you. As Gavin comes to the mic, our final 2 questions will be given by Liz Kalaman and Diane Trimper.
Security is not only an ongoing issue in our district, but in this country, and it is rapidly growing. What? Sorry. Okay. We had our own incident in the high school involving trespassers with intent to hurt a student, which threatened the well-being of that student and us, despite a full security team. My question is, if elected, what plans do you have to improve the safety of us students?
So security is something that's been improving steadily since, at least I've been on the board. I mean, I don't know how it was before, but we as the board, as soon as we got onto the board, we started this ID plan, which we did not have before. We've spent over $300,000 getting cameras on Underhill Field. We are currently in the process of ensuring that there is signage on Underhill, making sure that random people don't show up there and do their own kickboxing classes instead of students doing that. That happens all the time, right? And also, again, as I mentioned before, I mean, we put up a we helped put up a policy. I mean, it is mainly the district about freshmen not getting out for lunch. And it sounds simple. I mean, I've said this before, but it reduces the number of fights we have.
I think I know which incident that you're referring to. Not being a sitting board member, I don't have a report on that. But my understanding from my high school student was that part of the issue around security was that a student opened a side door and let those students in. So that's not to cast blame, but it is to say, again, going back to the idea of being a community, we all have responsibility in this. So we can lock the front doors, we can lock the side doors, we can have security, but if we don't have everybody's buy-in in the building, we have a problem. So that's going to be incumbent upon the administration to, go back over our rules, our conduct, and that our actions have consequences, typically for other people. So, I think that answers your question, but I think there's more to so many of the stories that we hear.
So one of the things I think that the board did that was very important was we supported the idea of the director of security that had a social-emotional learning lens. At the time, there were board members that were pushing back against that idea because they just wanted someone that was straight security, that would say, look, lock the building down, ID checks, just to make sure that would keep students safe. But when you have students opening doors to let people in, you have to remember that they don't have a sense of belonging. They have this idea that, well, I can let this person in because I don't care. We need to increase that amount of social emotional learning, that sense of belonging, to recognize that this building is a family and we want to protect everybody here. And to do that, we need to not protect against outsiders, but recognize that when you do let someone in that is unknown to the building, that it can have this downstream consequences. So that's something that's really important, that we have a director of security that has that lens, and we need to improve our social emotional learning to increase that sense of belonging in our schools.
I'll just add that I know that safety and security has been an issue raised by the past two board, actually now we're on 3 student board reps on the school board, so we clearly have a lot more to do in this area. Students at Columbia don't feel safe, and that is not okay. I agree that we all as a community have a responsibility in that. I also would welcome working more with Mr. Vallis on where he thinks we can improve in this area, thinking about training of security guards. I also know that security guards are a really important position, and we should think about, are the salaries that we're providing them commensurate with that important position. We need to make sure that we have standard operating procedures in place and clear roles and responsibilities for the security guards, for the students, for the teachers, and for the administration.
Sorry, Jeff, did you want to say one?
I think the questioner was thinking about security within the buildings, but I do want to say actually our students travel to and from the buildings, and safety issues can come up. We know that 2 children were actually hit by a car near Tuscan about a week ago, and the parent of one of the students was quoted saying it's a miracle she survived. So we do actually want to make sure that our kids are safe getting to and from school. That would require working with the towns to make sure there are enough crossing guards. That would entail having bike infrastructure for kids who are biking, so we can do it as safely as possible. If there's a child who's just under a distance threshold for busing, which would be 2 miles for middle schools and 1.25 miles for elementary, we should give the child a bus seat if we have a seat available on the nearest route. So that's something very important to me too, in addition to the building type securities that was in the question.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? Great. I want to thank CCR, and it's been exciting to hear the questions from the community. I will say I'm a lot less nervous this year being here, and applaud all the candidates for the hard work and prep that goes into this evening. So board service requires not only ideas and plans, which there are no shortage of on the campaign trail, but also continuous learning. So as a board member, what areas are you most curious about learning, if you're not currently a board member, about? And for our incumbents, what have you learned about board service, and how will you approach gathering this knowledge should you be elected?
That's a very interesting question. I was on the Board of Education about 10 years ago, and the board at my time had a different format. It didn't have as many committees as it has now. It didn't have as many administrators who came to committee meetings as it has now. It didn't really have an executive committee. It had a different structure also for like passing policies. So actually, I have to realize that actually, even though in a way I'm a very senior board member, I'm also a rookie. I'm in my first year, and I have a lot to learn from the people who have already been on the Board of Education for 1 or 2 years. So I have a lot to learn. In terms of statewide policy, I do follow like the state's like tax and budget news very closely. Like, I read like New Jersey Spotlight. I try to keep track of what's happening in other districts. So I have quite a lot to learn, of course. Although I do come in actually with a lot of institutional knowledge. Like I've seen us try things and fail, and seen us try things and succeed. So unfortunately, the district may have its controversies or crises in the next few years. I do think actually I'll have like a good sense of institutional history and like dealing with them and like having insights on how we can move forward.
I think for me, joining this campaign with Jeff and Deirdre, the amount of learning that you had just going door to door and meeting the community at events I'm hearing for the first time, community clubs I'm hearing for the first time, door to door canvassing. That stuff has been probably the biggest learning curve I've had since moving here. But I would say the area that I'm most curious, interested, and just want to learn more about is the special services, special education, CPAC. I would say that has probably been the one thing that's probably turned me upside down in terms of what the students have been going through, what the parents have been going through, what the teachers have been going through, and just those experiences and the various ways that we could serve these students. That's something that in the next 3 years, if I'm elected, that's probably one of the biggest areas.
One space where I'd like to learn more personally is pre-K. We know more and more that early childhood education is just so important in setting students up for success, and it's an interesting area because it's it's within the realm of the district, but it also requires a lot of partnership with outside organizations. So how I have tried to learn things throughout this campaign is by having a lot of conversations with parents, teachers, and those who are involved. So if you are a parent of a pre-K student, send me an email, stephanforboe@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to you.
Okay, we're going to move to our last question, if we may. And after that, I know the hour is getting late. We thank you guys for staying with us and being thoughtful. We'd love to have you stick around for the closing statements, which will follow immediately after this last question. Thank you.
Hi. I went all the way through the Maplewood South Orange School District K to 12, and we just had our 60th reunion from CHS. And someone at the reunion, and it was an incredible education, by the way. One person said, we all felt as if we were the one that did not belong. Is there anything that you think can be done to seek to enhance students' social skills to make each student feel valued? Thank you.
I think one of the things that we have right now in the school district is something called equal opportunity schools. And one of the things they actually have is asking students, do you have a trusted adult in the building? And one of my goals is I believe that every student should feel like they have a trusted adult in the building, because that's part of having that sense of belonging. When we look at a place like Columbia, we have all the different options you want. You can do like I did fencing, I did animation, I did jazz band, I did cross country, I did everything I could. And then I went and did engineering because, I consider that to be fun. We always have all these pathways, but that sense of there's a trusted adult that I can go to and speak to is something that's very important, because that's how you I guess you won't feel like you're alone in school.
I agree with that 100%. I'll add on that, I think especially in middle school, it's been really, the high school offers a lot of different activities for kids to get involved, but I think the middle school, I would love to see more activities. I'd love to see more arts programming, more, music. I know, students that escape to go see certain teachers at lunchtime because it's a safe haven, more of those opportunities for students. But, I think getting back to rebuilding our arts, that's such a great way for students to learn about who they are and connect with others, as is athletics. But and I know we have a lot of that in the high school, but the arts budget has been depleted, and I really would love to see that built back up. And I'd love to see more facilities for our athletes that are equitable, but I'd really love to see more programming at the middle school, because I do see that that is a real area where kids need a lot more social supports, especially when they're going through so many changes in their lives.
Thanks, Jeff. As the only out queer person, I did not see myself any place in any building, and I did K through 12 in this district also. Granted, it was a different time, but I think in addition to the trusted adult, continuing to normalize all of these other is just incredibly important. We have a few student interns that are working on our campaign. It's been a really, really fun experience. I know for us, I hope for them as well. And one of them said at a coffee that one of the reasons she wanted to come work with us was because she's also queer and Jewish. And she identified with seeing an adult who was trying to give back to the community, and she felt it made her safer, it made her visible, and it was meaningful to her.
I think that there are many ways that actually we can help students have a sense of belonging. I'm only just giving one. I do think we need to actually support clubs at the high school. It's such a big high school. It's possible for a student to kind of feel lost. When we met with the student representatives to the Board of Education last month, I was very disappointed to hear that the high school didn't have a debate team anymore, and that certain other clubs actually weren't doing as well as they had been a few years before. So I do want to make sure that we have the extracurriculars at the high school and the middle school that we can to give kids a niche other than the pure academics.
Thank you, Jeff. That will conclude our questions and direct responses from our candidates. Now we're going to move into the closing statements, for which each candidate will have a minute and a half, and in their statement they should include how they will personally navigate difficult working relationships, to find effective, respectful ways to work together to benefit our students, and also include how voting for them will ensure equity for all students. Since we started on this end with the opening statements, we're going to start on the other end with Arun Vadlamani for the closing statements.
So, going back to our middle school days and algebra and linear graphs, we know that y is equal to mx plus c, if you remember. So where x is, let's say that is number of years, and y is the improvement you have in our school district, and m is the slope, right? It tells you how much it's going to increase. The problem with most new candidates, not just them, including me 3 years back, is that they promise you a slope of 2. Basically what they're saying is, we will give you a 100% rate of increase per annum. That's unlikely. So these new, one-issue candidates burn out after 3 years, and they never run for re-election. And that is a problem for our community. And that is why you need candidates who are calm and pragmatic, who look to build steady improvements, and who want to run for re-election. And that is Kwawi, Arun, and Bethany. The triple I, right, started with placement errors and sibling preference issues, but it has improved year on year and is a runaway success. All schools look like each other. That is surely a slope of 1. Kwabi and I hired a new superintendent to build a stable administration. We are asking you to re-elect us and stabilize the board. We will ensure the teachers get a good contract and are happy, and that is an honest way Kwabi, Arun, and Bethany will oversee the school district.
I'd like to thank the CCR for inviting us. I guess when I thought about this question about equity work, and I think about the CCR's work as trying to, 2 towns, 1 community. Right now we have the triple I, and I think of it as many schools, one neighborhood. We have this idea of making sure that our classrooms reflect what the community looks like. And some of the questions that come up are, well, that's not convenient for me. I've heard that term used throughout this campaign by some. And I have to ask the question is, when has equity ever been convenient? It never is. It's constant work. It's hard work, but we have to recognize that it's an investment. And the investment is always going to be our students. We want our student outcomes to improve, and that improves by ensuring that they feel a sense of belonging in any school that they go to. And when we look at the idea of what's important is that we want to create well-rounded students. And I think that our slate does that with community collaboration and stability. These are not just random words. They're words that you hear everybody here speaking and constantly repeating, because that is what actually allows us to move forward. On a board with division and different values, one of the most important things is to recognize that we all believe in improving student outcomes, and we do that by first understanding what our role as board members are, working from that foundation, and then moving up.
The district's goal is to meet the needs of every student, no matter their background and their abilities, and to help them reach their full potential. And we're not there yet. No one person is going to get us there. It's going to require the work of all 9 board members working together with the superintendent and with the community. You have heard people promise strong relationships in the past. I have spent my career actually building those kinds of relationships. As a lawyer, I stand up for communities that have been harmed by polluters, while also working with the lawyers that those polluters have hired to try to shut my clients' cases down, and we find ways to find common ground and work together. As somebody who was a teacher, I know the kind of struggles that our teachers face. I'll make sure that their voices are not just heard, but valued in the conversation. I'm the only independent candidate up here. If elected, I'll be the only independent candidate on the board. And so I will, if by necessity, if for no other reason, work with everybody else. I've tried to run a positive campaign that focuses on why I think you should vote for me and not why I think you should vote against somebody else, because I've tried quite hard to build bridges and not walls throughout this campaign. This is not going to be easy. Disagreements are going to happen. It's going to be easier to talk than listen, but I will listen. Things are going to go wrong. It's going to be easy to point fingers, and I won't point fingers. Tensions are going to run high, and the needs of adults are going to take center stage. I will work to keep the focus on our students. Thank you.
So I said at the beginning that I'm running because I'm an optimist, and I always will be. And this district, we all know, is full of potential. We have a new superintendent, Mr. Bing, and we know he's a symbol of progress and leadership. We have newly elected board members this year can provide the opportunity for new energy and support for our district, our superintendent, teachers, parents, students. And you've heard me say it before on the campaign trail, we are at an inflection point. It's why I'm very excited to be running with my friends over there, Jeff and Deirdre. I think we're a great alchemy of empathy, tenacity, enthusiasm. Jeff's a former board member, and he showed his prowess today with some of the data and the whiz behind it. Deirdre's extensive experience in policy and holding the government accountable, and her passion for the arts. My experience in the startup, in the studio side, handling operations and communications. When we were asked about what we could do personally for this stuff, I manage a full staff and negotiate for a living. That means navigating personalities and finding common ground. That means compromise. That means listening and leading with principle. That means having a glacier's patience, skills necessary to work together toward a shared purpose. So together with my running mates, we've got 30 years in the community. We've got children from pre-K to 12th grade. And this experience allows us to evaluate policies and conduct board governance from a parent's perspective, which contributes greatly to our shared vision of growth and accountability in our schools, and with student outcomes as our beacon.
Thank you, everyone. This has been eye-opening for sure, and a really great experience. Thank you, CCR. I did not prepare remarks because I really wanted to take in everybody's thoughts and what was going on in the room. But I did have a friend shared with me that the New Jersey School Board Association tells us in their best practices, a board member should listen to understand. And that's during an interaction with a community member, another board member, the superintendent, being thoughtful in your role as a board member and contributing to calm and stability. So it's a little bit like they read our platform, so I'll have to get some money for that, I guess. But it's also social work 101. Be where your client is. So being a good listener, being an empathetic listener, being willing to be flexible and to change your point of view. It's something that I've experienced in working on the campaign with Kwawi and Arun, that they have strong opinions, but they're also more than willing to listen and to be good partners. One of the things that I learned at the Catholic hospital where I work, yes, you heard that right, the lesbian Jew works at a Catholic hospital. One of the priests taught us a phrase called revolutionary patience. And it is that we have ideas and things that we want to put forward, and we have to assess where we're all at as a community so that an individual's ideas aren't at the fore.
Hello, and yes, thank you, CCR, so much for having us tonight. When I was preparing for this meeting, I was reflecting on the vision of CCR, and it was really remarkable to me because I think it very much aligns with, where the district should go in terms of our vision, or I think it aligns with our current vision, I should say. We aspire to be a community that is a model for the nation in which people of different races, ethnic groups, and backgrounds can interact, form friendships, and participate fully in the community's economic, political, civil, and educational and cultural life. I think a lot of that is what Jeff, Bimmel, and I have been trying to bring back, and it's relevant, or it speaks to what our platform is about, I should say. We want to bring back the voices of teachers. We want to bring back the voices of students. We want to bring back the voices of parents. And we know that it's only working collaboratively and together can we start to address some of our district's challenges. And can we make true progress on our equity recommendations and our special education recommendations. Our platform is also about a focus on academic excellence in the whole child, and creating a district that meets the diverse needs of every student. And again, I think that aligns very nicely with the topics that we've discussed today. We need diverse classes for our students, we need the arts, we need facilities for our athletes, and we need to support the whole child no matter their background. Thank you.
I come to this campaign having very varied experiences with our district education. I went to education school before I became a teacher. I was a public school teacher. I was on our town's Board of Education for almost 4 years. I have a lot of institutional history. I now have 3 kids in the district from pre-K to middle school. I actually have a child in the district through 2037. That's not as long a future as Kali has, but it's pretty good. I'm not a single issue candidate, although I am a triple I parent, and I actually do see a lot of people in unnecessary stress and hardship. I don't like to use the word inconvenience in relation to what people are going, because I think that belittles it, but I think stress and hardship are just not really things that we should just let people go through if we don't need to. I think I've said a lot about curriculum in terms of actually wanting to have more science and history in the elementary schools. And I have a lot of ideas on stabilizing the budget, as well as predicting budget stress for next year. I understand it that way. I have some ideas to take us to the next level budgetarily. I do think the III should be tweaked, but I do support the core intention of it, which is balancing our schools so that each classroom, each school represents our community as a whole. But I do think we can achieve that by working with parents. I think it's against common sense that we never ask parents what they need or want. Collaboration begins with asking questions. If I'm elected to the Board of Education, I hope to be friendly. Kali and Arun could confirm that we actually had beer once together a year ago. But getting a better III wouldn't just be me. It would be working with the administration. It would be getting a high-quality experience survey. It would be working with Michael Alves. The ideas we espouse for avoiding isolated placements, allowing transfers, waitlists, they come from Michael Alves too.
Thank you. And thank you for your closing remarks. Before we turn it over officially to be closed out by our executive director, I want to offer my heartfelt thanks to both the candidates and to you. You made this job very easy and also made us all very proud to be a part of this community. Nancy?
Thank you, Audrey. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I especially want to thank the Schools Committee for organizing this event each year, and for our trustees who are behind all the work that we do. I also want to thank the candidates. This is a hard job. I've been there. Where it's exciting, as some of you have mentioned tonight, to have so many candidates. Like many school districts do not get this level of involvement. I will tell you that I do a lot of work across the state and interact with other communities and state groups, and eyes are on this community. They look to us as a model. What is happening? It is really heartening to hear both the questions and the responses, pride in the school district, acknowledgement of successes and change over time, and honesty about the challenges that we still face and the work that we still have to do. We still have work to do. We want to continue to be that model. In order to do that, we are at an inflection point, and I'm not talking strictly about the BOE election, but all elections. So we encourage you to get people to go out and vote so that the Community Coalition on Race can continue all the work that it does in the community. We invite you to learn more about us. We do have, I think you wanted me to mention, we have integrated art circle showcase coming up in November 17th. If you don't know about that program, it's a great way to bring people together socially. So we do a lot of hard work and advocacy and hard conversations, and then we try to do some things where we get to know one another. So we encourage you to come out to that and check out our website, join us, become a volunteer, and again, thank you all for being here tonight, and vote.